the numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Zerl. With me on Skype is...
Coach Nez.
Visit us at zpnetwork.com, zoicsonline.com. We're on Facebook at the Nothing Shocking Podcast Community Fan Page and the Quad Cities Rock and Roll Junkies Interest Group. Our Twitter handle is NoShockPod. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, all your podcatchers. Subscribe there, rate and review the show. We will read reviews on the air. It does help us out in the charts, getting noticed, and getting the guests that we do. So, sponsors, do you have them in front of you, Eric? Or you?
I do, yeah. I'm ready to go, man. Ragged Records, new and used, Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Illinois. Legends Guitar Picks out of Milan, Illinois, and RockstarPicks.rocks out of Queens, New York.
And we are on, oh my God, I forgot what we're on Sunday nights. Internet radio, Rock Rage Radio, yeah. Sundays at noon Central Time.
Yep.
And then I want to thank the band Hong Kong Sleepover for letting us use their music. Did you get to see them recently?
I saw them, I believe it was, I took off from Mexico March 11th. I believe I saw them on, it was like March 8th or 9th or something like that. It was like 2 days before I took off. Yeah, so they opened up for the Eastside Gamblers with Tony Higbee of Tom Kiefer, the lead guitar player for Tom Kiefer. And so that was a pretty awesome show. Hong Kong Sleepover played the full Butcher and Bolt album in its entirety.
Really?
Yeah, they played nothing off Bolshevik Firecrackers. They played Butcher and Bolt from start to finish. And it was awesome. It's heavy. So if you're expecting a Bolshevik Firecrackers, you're not going to get it. This one is much heavier. I think Bolshevik Firecrackers is more groove oriented and what have you. I think Butcher and Bolt is way heavier. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I've been describing it as kind of like, everybody, you always have the Motorhead thing there, but there's a little Black Label Society in there too, kind of the combination of the two. It's a great album, the new Hong Kong Sleepover. So go check that out on Apple Podcast, Amazon, wherever you get your music. Or not Apple Podcast, Apple Music. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Spotify, wherever else they want you to go check it out at. And I saw them a little while back too, and they actually played a combination of the two. But they're great as always.
Absolutely.
Sorry for the delay again. It's just crazy weather, spring break, and other things that just keep popping up. We're going to try to get more regular here in the coming weeks, but we are at least getting you this one. Chicago Open Air, that is coming to Bridgeview, Illinois, with the Chicago Fire Play, May 18th and 19th. System of a Down, Tool, Ghost, Meshuggah, Gojira in this moment. The Prodigy was originally scheduled to be on it since... we last recorded the lead singer, what's his name? Keith Flint. He passed away, and so obviously Prodigy won't be there. The Cult is taking their place, so...
even better. I'm not trying to say, not losing an act is bad, but, man, you got the Cult to come on in that spot. Not too bad.
Yeah, it's a cool spot, and it's a nice... they're polar opposites of the Prodigy, but they also are still bringing a different flavor for this festival. Which Prodigy was doing that as well. So it's a good addition to the lineup, and obviously it sucks that Prodigy can't be there in their whole situation. But Chicago Open Air, May 18th, May 19th. You can get tickets through our show notes. We do have a link in there. If you do buy them through there, we get a little bit of notice, and it helps us cover next year's show if there is one, possibly even this year's.
How cool is that?
And then our guest this week is Rob Carlyle, The Compulsions.
Yep. what a cool guy. I mean, it doesn't get any sleazier than the Compulsions. He was kind of on. He was very candid about things. You know, when I listen to Compulsion stuff, it's always kind of humorous, and I feel it's always kind of lighthearted. We kind of shed the light on for us is that, okay, it might have the humor to it, but it's not necessarily lighthearted. Right. So if you're not familiar with the Compulsions, it's sleaze rock, and it's got a lot of messages to it.
Right. It's fun. It's dark. It's good. I've enjoyed it. I have all their records, and I know he's working on one now. Hopefully we get it in the next year or so. But we are going to play some of his music on the show. After our little intro, we're going to play Hellbound Babies. Then we're going to go into the interview, and then after the interview, we're going to close the show out with Silly Little Women, all off the album Dirty Fun. Came out in 2015. All of his music's available streaming, Apple Podcast, Amazon, Spotify, and so definitely check him out. He's a hell of a musician, and I mean he's several great musicians have played with him in the Compulsions. So it's I don't know, I enjoy their music a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got Guns N' Roses ties. He has Richard Fortus, Frank Ferrer, and he's got Hanoi Rocks ties with Sammy Yaffa. So how cool is that?
Yeah, it's good stuff. And then before we get you to the interview, Netflix released The Dirt. I know you haven't had a chance to see it yet, Eric. I did watch it, and it's funny because if you look at the critic reviews and the fan reviews, it's almost identical to Bohemian Rhapsody. And Bohemian Rhapsody got nominated for an Oscar. In fact, one guy won. So I don't know. It's hard to say if it's good or bad, but the fans are loving it. So that's really... And the album's #1, the soundtrack. So
oh, cool.
Good for Motley Crue. I did see it. It's... I like it enough, but at the same time, it's just like... We all know the story, you know, everything that bad had happened to them, and it's almost like a greatest hits of bad things that happened to Motley Crue, and you just wait for the next thing to happen. And when you have a movie like that, and you have to get it down to 2 hours, you know, when Tommy Lee's meeting Heather Locklear the night that Vince Neil's killing Razzle, it's kind of I don't know, it does kind of bother you as a fan. But at the same time, you understand that you have to kind of combine these things into one story, one timeline. I mean, the one thing I like about Bohemian Rhapsody better is they focus more on the music. Here, they just kind of focus on the partying and the tragedies.
Right.
They do spend some time with Livewire, though. The best part of the movie, though, is Mick Mars. He's the coolest character in real life and in the movie. So.
Oh, awesome! Quickly, how did you feel like the actors that played the roles of the band members? Did you think that they did a good job, or what was your feel on that?
Here's the thing: I do another podcast with a film critic, and he said the acting was atrocious, and I said, look, you don't have Freddie Mercury and Motley Crue. You have Bill and Ted, basically. You have 4 Bill and Teds, and these guys knocked it out of the park. But it's not... I thought they were good. But, you know, Nikki Sixx, Tommy Lee, they're not great characters, per se. So right. I thought they did good. Mick Mars, his character is more of a badass, which in real life, you know, not that he's not a badass. He's a badass in his own right. But he obviously has that disorder, that disease, and they do talk about it here, but they don't show it physically as much. But otherwise, I thought the acting was fine. It's Motley Crue, so you can only be so... I don't know. They did a good enough job. The issue I have had with critics is blaming, saying it's out of touch for 2019. It's not PC, and I'm like, it's Motley Crue. You know what you're getting going in. Lots of nudity, lots of drugs, lots of rock and roll. It's a if you like Motley Crue, you're gonna like this movie.
Awesome.
And with that, I guess we can throw it over to Rob Carlyle. But before we do that, we're gonna play Hellbound Babies off of Dirty Fun. Is there anything else before I let you go?
No. Hopefully we can get on the bandwagon again and get some more episodes going here. So apologize to all the listeners out there. We're gonna get a little bit more consistent, hopefully, this spring season.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, here's Hellbound Babies off Dirty Fun. After the interview, we'll play Silly Little Women, also off of Dirty Fun. So enjoy.
Good night.
American rock and roll. Lord have mercy on the hellbound babies. Lord have mercy on immortal souls. The hellbound babies are opening for new gin. Doors open at 7, the babies play at 8. The hellbound babies ain't playing to no one. And once again the babies ain't getting paid. Lord have mercy on the hellbound babies. A little pity for the desperate souls. They just wanna play them guitars. They just wanna bang them drums. The hellbound babies just wanna have some dirty fun. They sure do. Look out. Lord have mercy on the hellbound babies. Bless their wild and restless souls. They just wanna get some action. They just wanna get some chicks. The hellbound babies ain't ever gonna call it quits. No, they won't. Not today. Not no way. Oh no.
Rob, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I want to introduce you to my co-host, Bob Earl.
Hey, how are you doing?
No, I'm great, man. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Well, okay, so I have to, apologize to you. I know we started corresponding right around the holidays, and between weather, Bob's job, and
More weather.
more weather, and we're still getting weather tonight. We put it together, and I got the stomach flu, and then now I have came down with a sinus infection. But we're going to make this work tonight. So, thank you for staying with us and saying not saying screw these guys.
Nah, of course.
So fantastic. Well, when I had kind of corresponded with you back in December, you had kind of gave me a lowdown that the Compulsions are in the studio. You guys are recording new material, or is it finished yet? Are you guys still working on the new album? Where are you at right now?
That's where am I at? There's about 30 songs in the works, but we've recently focused on like the 10 that seem to work together as a package, as an album. And so the name of that album is Ferocious. And so, yeah, I think all recording is done on those 10 tracks. We're just, mixing and tinkering and stuff like that. And it's I would say it's like 95% done. And so, yeah, that's where those 10 songs are at. The rest, I would need like a chart to figure out, what level of production everything is in. And so I'll get to those when I get to those. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And you talk about you have 30 songs, and you're kind of whittling it down to 10. is that kind of the beauty for that is that, hey, now I still have 20 in the bank for when we're ready to record another album, or how does that work out for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I had like I don't know how else to describe it, but I guess like a burst of creativity in like 2016, 2017, and that's when all this stuff pretty much came out. There's a few tracks that are like from the quote unquote the old days that just never got released, and they fit in really great with this new stuff. But yeah, I feel really good knowing that I'm always in songwriting mode all the time, but I'm not really like under pressure to like come up with anything. So if the song happens to hit me, I have it, but it does feel good to have 10 songs. You pretty much, they're pretty much done. They're going to be on an album, and then there's like another I guess 15 or to 20 more songs after that are going to be gotten to eventually. They're not going to go to waste, that's for sure.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, you always hear about these artists like Miles Kennedy, or I think even Dr. Dre, they had an album and they're just like, you know what, I'm in a different place now. So these 10 songs that I had there.
I know. It must be nice to have that much money to just, to work on stuff and discard it. But I'm not at that place. I waste not, want not is kind of my take on it. So yeah, I love all the tracks. I love all the past tracks. I still stand by those, and I love all the stuff that's in the works. It all fits together and works together.
How do you pick the 10? You just kind of at random, or how do you know which 10 are the ones for this album and not the next?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of ways, but I guess, you're always looking for like, what's the intro track? You're always like, this would be a great intro track, and the closer. That's really important. And there's certain tracks that just jump out at you as like, that's a great opener, and that's a great closer. With these ones, on this particular album, I noticed that there was a lot of violent imagery in a lot of the lyrics, which I never really did in the past releases. So I kind of was like, there's a lot of blood and guts. So let me make that be like the thing. And so it just worked with the title. With the album cover, it just looks like a nasty, violent, dark record, which it is. It's also a hilarious record in spots too. I mean, I think it covers all the bases, but there's just you just look for anything to tie it all together. And I think in a weird way, it was like there's a lot of violence on this album.
That's
everything from guns and axes to literally the end of the world. Like it runs the gamut.
Which is kind of surprising to me, because from what I know from you and your music, it's always been, to me, I always found it to be very fun, very lighthearted. Don't take anything too serious. That's just kind of the vibe I get when I listen to your past recordings. Is it just something that just kind of organically happened when you were in the writing process, or was it kind of like a political type thing?
A lot of things. I think I was really pissed off at the time, and I just wanted to get a lot out. And one of the most violent songs on the album is hilarious. So that sense of humor is still there. And also like in a weird way, I kind of have like a mental checklist of like some great subject matters to write about. I mean, sex is always there, drugs is always there, rock and roll is always. That's the three classics. And violence is also, that fits in really, really well too. So you're just kind of going down the checklist of like things to write about. Like how many different ways can you write a song? What was the other part of your question?
I was kind of saying, it.
I was going to say. Sorry. Yeah, there is a lot of lighthearted stuff in the Compulsions, but there's a lot of nasty stuff too. I don't know what you listen to, but there's some real dark, nasty ones. Like if you go back and listen to Betrayed, That's the kind of nastiness I'm talking about.
Okay.
I Was Right, You Were Wrong is pretty nasty. What about the last album? There was a song called Evil Bastards. That was really nasty. So we definitely go there. But again, you can't be. You can't have. I don't want to put out an album that just has one vibe and one mood all the way through. So when I say there's violent imagery on it, like I don't want you to think it's like, it's like a black metal album or something like that. There's definitely a lot of comedy on there too.
I listened to. I'm trying to think of what band it was, but most of their music's really dark, and they said the reason they write dark music is just more to, when you get on stage, it's easier to get to that dark place, and if you're in a bad mood, it's hard to get to that happy, fun place. In terms of, when you're playing live, is it hard to, is there one mood that works better, on stage for you?
At this point, we play clubs. I just try and keep the energy level, up, or in other words, no ballads, or if it's a club show, maybe one ballad. But I haven't done a ballad on stage with the Compulsions in a long time. Nothing against ballads, I love them, but in a hot, sweaty club atmosphere, people just kind of want to get pulverized by guitars. You know what I mean? So you just give it to them. But that being said, a super intense show with a great ballad in the middle of it really, jumps out. We have this one song called My Favorite Wine from back in the day, and people would always comment on that song whenever we played it. So there's I don't know. There's no rules. You just do what happens, what you're feeling, what you feel like doing for that particular show.
When you're writing, are you thinking about the live performance at all, or are you just strictly in writing and creating mode? Like how the song's going to work for the stage?
I don't know. I mean, you definitely. I try and write the songs to be real easy for the band to learn. That they're not complicated songs. I want everybody to just, I don't want them to be thinking too much on stage, just like, just feeling and playing. I don't know how to really answer that. These days when I'm writing, it's mostly like, a lot of it is like I'm trying to tackle. I like to tackle subject matter that I haven't tackled before. It's basically rock and roll is like it's the same 4 or 5 songs over and over and over again. The trick is to make it seem like it's not. So I try and tackle like subject matter that like I haven't done before. Like I've never to this day I've never done a song about a car. That's a great place to go for songwriting. Or I've never done a song with a girl's name in it. I've never done a song with a day of the week in it. See, I look at it more like that way. Like what haven't I done yet?
Do you when you go into songwriting, the lyrics especially? Are you thinking of like I'm gonna do a car song right now, or do you just kind of let the words come out and then organically I get to that car song? You know what I'm saying? Is it more planned out ahead of time, or does it organically get there?
It kind of both. Like in the early days, I think I was more deliberately writing songs with the word devil in it and fire in it. I was going for those cliches, but trying to put a new spin on them. And now it's more like I'm trying to be honest as possible about like what I'm going through, like what and again like and basically tell you the same story, but just in a different way. You know what I mean? It's the same story over and over again, but you're just trying to put it in a different way.
Well, I am Facebook friends with Frank, and that's how I kind of discovered the Compulsions. And the one thing that kind of captivated me was
Frank who?
Frank.
I'm joking.
So the thing that's that kind of captivated me outside the music is that for me to try to go find for me to go find Beat the Devil on a CD, I had to buy it off of somebody on eBay or something like that. It was really hard for me to find. And as I tried to look through, find your EPs and everything, it's a very process to try to find hard copies of your stuff for people that up here in the Midwest. Is with the new album coming out, will it be more accessible for your fans and listeners?
I mean, I always ask people, when I'm at parties and stuff, I'm like, how do you? I don't say how do you consume music, but basically that's the question: is how do they listen to stuff? And I try and get a sense. And everybody's kind of all over the place. People do whatever, and I wasn't aware. It seemed to me like physical copies was kind of like out, but not for you, obviously. I would love to be able to put everything out in every format possible. It's just that, quite honestly, I'm on a low budget, and it costs money to make all that stuff. When you go press up CDs, you got to buy 1,000.
Right.
A minimum of if I go get CDs pressed up, you got to buy a box of 1,000 at a minimum. So with a band that really doesn't play out as much as it should and is not as exposed as I think it should be, it's hard to get rid of those 1,000 albums. So I've been doing the more digital way these days, but yeah, I didn't know you were hunting them down. I didn't know you were hunting down physical copies. I didn't know there were physical copies out there, to be honest with you. I know you can go to Amazon and they'll press them up like one by one and send them to people. But as far as the EPs, I don't know where you got that.
The Beat the Devil CD, I think I purchased a year ago. I found it off of a seller on eBay, and I spent like $35 for it to get it.
What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No, and I kid you. And the thing about it is, some of those copies will show up on eBay, and then people buy them up, and they go away. You can't find it, and then all of a sudden it shows up again with a different seller, or maybe they're on a different name or something. And
I got to tell you, I'm making no money off those records. I guess somebody else is.
Somebody else is, and the thing about it is, there's for some reason, there's a demand for it on an eBay or something like that. So I don't know what I don't know what Amazon has.
So what's this guy doing? Just burning a copy off?
This is
digital copy he has?
I mean, this looks like a legitimate. I mean, it's not a burn copy; it's a silver press. So I don't know.
I had no idea. Yeah, this is news to me. I mean, it's good news and it's horrible news all at the same time. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly, guys, I'm on a low budget. I got nothing but me, and and that's it's just me. So I would love to be able to give everybody everything in every format possible, but I'm just not able to do that right now.
Wow. Well, now there's people out on eBay selling your album.
I had no idea. I've been on eBay maybe 3 times in my whole life, so maybe I need to check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Bob.
No, you kind of caught me off guard.
Right. Well, let's go. Let's kind of switch gears. Compulsions. You've had some different lineups. Obviously, you've had some notable artists from other bands in your band. I guess the question I might have, and I don't know if this would be as fair or not. How did that all come about? Where you've had some GNR connection, they've recorded with you, and then now you have a different group of artists working with you. Can you kind of give us a story behind all that?
That's a pretty long, winding story, but I'll try and make it quick. I know you're referring to Frank Ferrer and Richard Fortas, right?
Right.
I knew of those guys when they were like, playing the clubs in New York. They were not in Guns N' Roses at the time, but they were like, 2 of my favorite players around town, and after a while, I was like, why don't I just get those guys to to record with, and at that time, Richard was starting to work with Axl, but it was like nobody knew about it. It was like, it was on the down low or whatever it was, or it just wasn't, in the press or anything. So I found out, we learned about it, me and the producers, when he told us in the studio. Frank wasn't in GNR until a couple of years after he got in. I don't really know, the exact dates of things when it comes to this. And then they, basically, got way more involved with GNR and started touring and making an album and everything like that. And so I went back to trying to find the best, club level local players that I could find, and to mixed results. The recordings all came out great, but the shows, left a little bit to be desired to me, and also, people weren't paying attention. So you're just trying to figure out like what to do. And so I ended up hooking back up with Frank for a show we did. We were like the second band to play the John Varvatos. John Varvatos was having bands play, and I think we were the second one to be asked to do it. And that's when I kind of reunited with him at that show. And next thing you know, I got Richard and Sammy Yaffa in there, and that lineup, I love that lineup. I mean, it captured a lot of people's attention and imagination, and we got, the Compulsions always got great reviews, no matter who was in it. And that lineup also, and it just, there's a whole story which I don't really even understand about why we just couldn't keep it together. And then I was like, okay, if I'm not working with Fortis, I'm going to call Bumblefoot. And so I got him. And then Frank and I parted ways, and I went with Brian Delaney, who was in the New York Dolls, which Sammy Yaffa was also in. And Alec Morton, was in Raging Slab back in the day, and I always loved him. I got him to play bass. And then recently, just to mix things up, I called Earl Slick up one day and got him he's on I got him on about 8 songs, not on this album. He's on this album, he's probably on 3 songs on this album, but then I have another 5 or 6 with him for down the road. I don't know. I just got on a tear doing that. And, it wasn't as hard as you would probably think to contact those guys. And, it also didn't help that I've worked with Hubert Sumlin before, who was Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters' guitar player. And so, when serious rock and roll guys start to hear about other rock and roll guys working with you, it gets easier and easier. So and it attracts a lot of attention. They're also amazing players. Obviously super professional, prepared, and all that. So it just happened to work out that way. That doesn't mean that I would only work with, name brand session guys, however you want to phrase it, but that's just the way it's been. And it's actually been, I have a lot of fun with those guys.
Very cool.
You mentioned, you've had a lot of critical success, but you're still playing in clubs. How do you deal with, sometimes the critical success is pretty satisfying and rewarding, but without the, not being able to be a arena band or whatever else that you guys probably deserve based on the critical success you've had, how do you kind of balance the two?
You mean balance it in my mind?
Yeah, balance the success of the, the critics, but not blowing up to the level that you probably should be.
I mean, dude, it's infuriating. It's infuriating. There's no other way for me to say it. It's just infuriating, and it's super frustrating, and it's super discouraging. But I know that I write really, really good goddamn fucking rock and roll songs, and I know that not just rock, and they cover the gamut from old style rock and roll to super modern and futuristic type stuff. So it's I know that the material is there and the music is there, and I haven't been able to take it to the next level. No, it drives me nuts, man. It drives me crazy.
What is the key? Is it just, landing a couple big tours? Or, I mean, how do you get... I mean, obviously, if you knew the answer, you'd be there. But, I mean, what's the plan?
Yeah, but
you know what I'm saying? What's kind of the... Is that what would help us getting on, jumping on a Aerosmith or Guns N' Roses or even something like Steel Panther or something like that?
I have no idea how that world works. I got to be honest with you. I don't know. I know, I'm not referring to those bands necessarily, but I know that a lot of times if you're a smaller band opening up for a bigger band, you're paying to play. You're paying for the right to open up, for the chance to open up for that band. There's a lot of that. When you see these festivals with like 8 million bands, and there's the big name acts up at the top, and then there's like the B levels, and then once you start getting down the bottom, a lot of people are paying for that privilege or that opportunity, whatever you want to call it, to play for that big crowd, and then hopefully the thought is, well, we're going to pay to play, but we're going to blow the crowd away and take off from there. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I don't know how all that stuff happens. I really don't.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I know I'm friends with several young bands, and you're right. It's you're paying for that slot, but you're also playing at 10 in the morning on a side stage. That's not where Kiss is playing or whatever. So I mean, it seems like the best way to really make it is just do it for free for 20, 30 years, and hopefully your name gets remembered and you just keep popping up. And that's...
Well, I'm that guy. I'm doing exactly that. It's playing 20, 30 years. That's a long fucking time. And it's been almost 20 years for me at this point.
And here's a question that, you might be, more of a statement, maybe your input, not necessarily a question, but for instance, a band like Greta Van Fleet, I think is great. They're playing rock and roll music. My son, he's about those guys' age, and he doesn't listen to rock and roll music. There's no doubt that they are very Zeppelin-esque in what they try to do. But I think it's something is better than nothing because we are losing kids to not listening to rock and roll anymore. Where are your thoughts as the state of rock and roll is in? Is it better to have a band like Greta Van Fleet kind of leading the charge, but they're not necessarily the most original band in the world, opposed to a band like the Compulsions, yourself, who, right, like you said, really good rock and roll songs, and it's a really original how you do things. I guess I'm not quite sure what your thoughts are on the state of rock and roll to try to bring it back to the popular culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it probably too much. To me, I think rock and roll is in the fucking shitter. But I'll go as far as to say I think music in general is pretty goddamn bad, and I don't feel like it's a cultural force even like it used to be. And I think a lot of that has to do with, there's a whole book you could write on that. I think a lot of that has to do with politics is that's the big subject right now, and politics is moving so fast that even as a songwriter, it's almost impossible to even comment on it. And then why even comment on it? We all know what side we're on at this point. My song about X is not going to convince you to be on my side. You already, so I feel like music just in general, whether it's rock and roll, hip hop, or whatever, I just feel like it's not a cultural force like it used to be. It's just not. As far as getting to rock and roll in general, I mean, it's always been an underdog. It's such a complicated, subject matter. I don't know why it's not more popular than it is. I think for starters, there's not a lot of people out there anymore that could actually play it. And when I say rock and roll, I mean rock and roll, not rock. Like, that's a whole nother discussion we could have. Like, rock and roll really requires, you got to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different styles and subgenres, and you got to go all the way back to, Robert Johnson and before. You got to go back to Appalachian music and Irish music and African music. Like, you have to just know everything. You got to be Jimmy Page to be rock and roll. You know, you got to be Keith Richards to be rock and roll. And those are my heroes. And I listen to those guys, and I listen to all the stuff that they listen to all the way. I don't just stop at Led Zeppelin 1. You got to go all the way back to Book of White and Son House and all that stuff. And there's not a lot of people who really want to do that homework, or it shouldn't even feel like homework. It just never was to me. I just did it because I just love the sound of those records, and it maybe just seeped into me somehow. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about. I mean, there's always some sort of like little rock. There's not little, but there's always some sort of rock and roll band out there that's kind of sort of like leading the charge. I feel like I don't know how to say it, but I feel like I've been kicking all their asses, you know, since a whole bunch of them cropped up in the 2000s. I'm not going to name names, but there was a whole bunch of rock and roll bands that were supposed to come out and change the world. And where are they now?
Right.
Where are they now? You know, where are they now? And I know that I put on my records from the early 2000s, and they sound fresh as a daisy, and they sound relevant to today. And we're living in nasty times, and that Compulsions music from back in the day, you put on Down on the Tracks, that's a nasty fucking song. It sounds like today. I don't know. I'm not sure how to answer your question. It's an awesome question. I guess it does prove that kids do want to hear rock and roll guitars. You know, that's great. But there's just not a lot of it really happening in a real convincing way at that level. At the beginning, at the new band level.
Mm-hmm. And I think another problem is more the way that everything's so. I guess digital's part of it, but everything's so accessible, I guess. And I mean, if you look at late night talk show hosts, it used to just be one guy, and then it was Johnny, then it was Johnny and Arsenio and Joan, and then it was Leonard, and then now it's like 15 million people, different hosts.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with music. And now there's no. It's not like it's just AC/DC. There's all these different. It's almost like everybody's underground now, unless you're totally from Nashville songwriters, and you're that streamlined.
It's
country
true.
music.
It's true what you're saying. Yeah, it's definitely been flattened. The playing field has definitely been flattened. Obviously you're going to have your AC/DCs and your Rolling Stones and your Foo Fighters and your Metallicas and stuff, but it's just been flattened. And I think a lot of it, it's a real complicated. The reasons are many, and the accessibility thing that you said, that's one thing. There's just so many ways to consume music now, and we're not all going to the same source. The other thing that I mentioned before about, I feel like politics and world events of real life scary stuff has really taken a lot of our attention, and so music is just kind of more like a frivolous distraction at this point,
Right, and you mentioned not only just stopping at Led Zeppelin 1, but keep going back, and I do the same thing. I'm not a musician, or I just kind of dabble with it for fun, but it's still that unknown, that journey that, Eric's a collector. There's those things that you don't have to do anymore if you don't want to, So it's
right.
That's you had the mystery of Jimmy Page back in the 70s, and today it's like if he came out, you'd see the food on his plate on Instagram, every meal.
Yeah.
Which is neat in a way. It's neat to have that accessibility to rock stars, but at the same time, that mystery really meant something.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I was a kid, all my favorite records, I had no idea what Led Zeppelin even looked like. I had no idea what Pink Floyd looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need to. I didn't need to see how many hits they had today on YouTube to know whether I thought the music was good. My ears just told me, my gut told me. And I don't know how much of that is me just being a freak or I don't know what happened. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but the whole thing has drastically changed over the decades to where the mystery thing is kind of gone. I mean, you have to still find ways to you can't tell them everything. You can't tell the audience everything that's going on behind the scenes. But yeah, the mystery thing is definitely missed.
We kind of had the same conversation with Derek Green of Sepultura, and maybe you'll agree with this and maybe you don't. And here's my thought on maybe why rock and roll flattened. I think
when I say flattened, I mean all music. You know what I mean? Like all of it. It's all like everybody's been flattened. But go ahead.
Well, rock and rollers can be so snobbish with the bands that they love. They draw lines in sand and say, I listen to this and this, but I would never listen to this and this. And if you listen to this and this, you're a this, you're a that. I won't say the words that, whatever.
Right.
And it seems it almost got to a point where the rock and roll community, whether it be metal or classic rock guys or whatever you want to, whatever genre in the classification of rock and roll, became so passionate that it stopped. A thrash metal guy would only listen to thrash metal; he wouldn't listen to anything else. Or a guy that listened to more classic glam stuff like a Motley Crue or something like that, they would only listen to that. They would never cross the line and listen to thrash. And it got to be so snobbish.
Yeah.
And I felt like rock and roll kind of blew up from the inside. Do you kind of agree with that, or am I way off?
I think that I think as time goes by, and when I say time goes by, it could be decades. I think I know kids that listen to they think they put I don't what am I trying to say? Like for me, like back in the day, I wouldn't have put Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue in the same category. You know what I mean? Like I didn't Motley Crue was not my thing. But now kids today, I know like quote unquote metalhead type kids today, they love it all. Like they put it all in the they love all that stuff. So I think as time goes by, sometimes a new generation comes along and they're not as snobbish. I don't know if I'm addressing your point or not, but am I?
Well, it's kind of a hard thing to try to maybe I didn't explain it very well. Did I?
But I understand what he's saying, though. I mean, if you listen to classic rock now, you're going to hear Poison, Green Day, Nirvana, Metallica, with all next to each other.
Yeah,
and that didn't happen before.
No.
So I do think we are kind of. They're just kind of saying that's all rock now. There's no. I don't know.
But did you guys not? This goes to for both of you. It's like, did you ever not find back in the 90s or late 80s, early 90s, where when grunge came out, I don't listen to that hair stuff anymore. It's grunge or nothing for me, or vice versa. I don't know. It just seemed like to me with rock and rolls, and I think I was a kid that kind of fell in that same category too. That I would only listen to this and I wouldn't listen to that. It was like, now we're being so narrow-minded on rock and roll that our passion is making us so narrow-minded, and we're looking through tunnel vision when it came to we're too cool to listen to this, but I don't know.
Me personally, I think the one common thread of all the music that I like, no matter how old I was, whether I was like 3 to now, like it's got to have. There's a certain kind of groove that all has to have, and that's why I can like Pantera, and that's why I can like Son House. But there's some bands that like I don't really dig Iron Maiden. It doesn't have that groove that it doesn't have that thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those hair metal bands didn't have that groove for me, and so I just didn't really dig it. If you want to get specific, like I never bought any of their albums, but if I had to pick out out of a hair metal crew, I would pick out Rat, because that's kind of like got that like Aerosmithy kind of nasty groovy vibe. And I guess maybe Cinderella before like GNR came along and sort of like encapsulated all the best of that stuff and all the best of the early stuff. So for me, I was never like, it just has to have like a dirty, nasty groove, and I don't really care like what genre it is if we're talking about rock. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Fair. That's very fair.
And I mean, has this, this landscape of music, does it, I don't want to say lower expectations, but I mean, we mentioned, Metallica and AC/DC and Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters is kind of that last band in the pipeline that's going to be a stadium band. There's nobody behind them. I mean, everybody else is at best going to stop at an arena level. Does that make it more realistic and less, chasing that stadium rock? And I guess, does it make it more realistic that you're chasing the art rather than the success? I mean, does that make it more livable? You know what I'm trying to say? As a creator,
I don't know if I know what you're trying to say, but yeah, that doesn't. I don't see anybody coming out there right now that can fill a stadium. If that's what you're asking.
Well, I mean, as a creator, you yourself, do you want to be successful, but do you find yourself that is it in this landscape easier to chase the creation, the art, as opposed to chasing the success? I mean, it seems like you almost have to forget about the success and it happens on its own if you're lucky.
Yeah, you can't. You just have to do your thing. You just do the best, write the best songs you possibly can, and get the best players you possibly can, and put them out and produce them, as best as you can. You're gonna drive yourself crazy if you're trying to, I think you should just thinking about the music is probably the best thing to do.
I was reading some articles, and we're still lucky enough in our neck of the woods here to have a few record stores left. And the record stores that we do have seem like they've almost kind of hit a renaissance. Reading some articles that CD is starting to kind of make a comeback now to a certain level. We've seen obviously vinyl is doing very well for what it is, and also there's also cassette sales now as far as tangible product goes. I guess where it kind of leads me to, and I talk about this all the time. But do you ever foresee the time where kids are getting to the record store to get the new whatever album and take it home and burn it on or whatever and share it with...
I have a feeling those days are over at the record store. I think I don't know. They would have to shut down the internet basically for record stores to come back. They have to shut down the internet. You think they're going to shut down the internet? They should, but I don't know. I don't know that it's going to happen.
I do find it really cool, though. Earlier in the interview, you talked about, what song's a good opening track? That bands and artists are still thinking like that when they're writing music, as opposed to I just need one song for now, and 3 months later do another song. And I like the album, the fact that people are still thinking in album terms, because that's how I listen to music. Even if I listen to digital, I still listen to it albums at a time. I don't really do playlists and whatnot.
That's great. Yeah.
I guess maybe with that being said, on a creative level, when we're talking about recording new material, I ask this with all of our guests. The technology now where you can just record, your album wherever you want in your house at any time you want or whatever, opposed to going in and doing some studio stuff. Where's your head at there? I mean, do you like the accessibility of having you can just do it right in your own home, or do you kind of miss going into the studio and hashing it out?
I love working with the producers. I have two guys that I work with that I've been doing all this stuff with. One's Ken Rich and another guy named Hugh Poole, and I love working with those guys. I love having outside input. I trust them enormously, immensely, or whatever the word is. I don't know that you can make. I don't know that you can make an AC/DC quality album in your apartment. I don't think so. I still think there's no substitute for like a drummer in a room. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm wrong, because I've heard some drum samples, that sound amazing. So
you can tell,
I like the process of of other people's opinions and styles and flavors, getting on the stuff and doing that in a studio. I do like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell when it's not a real. I mean, even no matter how good it is, you can still tell when there's a band playing on this computer. At least I feel like I can.
I'm actually. It's I don't know when it's going to come out, but there is a Compulsion song in the works where that was the directive. I was like, I want this to sound like a shitty, crappy song recorded, in my bedroom. Like that's what we're going for, is that vibe. So you can do any. I mean, you can do anything, but if you want like a full-on, full-throttle rock and roll song, I don't know if you're going to do that in your house on your laptop. But I love those quirky, kind of like early Beck type stuff. I love that too, and that I don't know that that's how he made records, but that's sort of like the vibe that it had, or a lot of artists from that period of time, and it just worked because the songs it worked with the songs, it worked with the artist and stuff like that. So that can work. I just don't see Aerosmith making an album, in Steven Tyler's bedroom. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Make it in Joe Perry's garage, I think.
Well, that might happen. But the whole making it, on your laptop type thing, that's a certain way to make records, and you could have a lot of fun doing that and making an awesome album. I just don't know that it's going to be the kind of, big, heavy guitar,
right.
Album that I think guys like me and you really love. You know what I mean?
Okay, well, we're kind of coming down to the end of our allotted time. We feel like we barely just scratched the surface with you. Hopefully, maybe you'll want to come back on and talk with us some more in the future. But I got one more question.
For sure.
I got one more question for you. So this is kind of like a non-music question. Bob and I, we're diehard Chicago Cub fans. We live in an area where there's quite a few St. Louis Cardinal fans because we're on the Mississippi River Valley, what have you. I know you're a New York City guy, but are you a Yankees or a Mets fan?
Man, I don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I'm sorry to say.
Oh man, darn! I thought all New Yorkers were baseball passionate.
I don't know. I don't know, dude. I watch the news and I play guitar. That's my day. But what were you going to ask me?
I was always curious to know. Sometimes when you go into different regions of the United States, when you have professional. I mean, sports are just passionate. Period. And you go into like a place like New York City where it's New York Yankees crazy. I just wanted to know, if you had a team that you rooted for, and what was the number of Yankee fans to Mets fans, because I know that Yankees pretty much outnumber.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any of that stuff, man. I don't know any of that stuff. I just do rock and roll all day. I don't know what else to tell you.
No, you said the album's about 95% done, give or take. When do you foresee it coming out?
I have no idea. I just got to scrape a few bucks together and finish it off. I'm kind of enjoying it being this sort of like impending,
Nice.
Looming or whatever, impending doom that's about to. I kind of like it not being done. So it's kind of a cool feeling. But at the same time, I do want to get it done. I don't know. My hope is to get it done this year. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to. So yeah, I would say 2019.
Oh, awesome. Very cool. All right. Well, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like to promote or plug?
I got a tour coming up in. I'm playing with a new friend of mine. His name is Daryl Bath, and he's got a great band from the UK. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but I kind of describe him to people as basically the UK version of me. Like we're totally, lovers of that, guitar-based, bluesy, punky kind of rock and roll. And he's got a great band called the Crybabies, and they put out an album a few years ago, and the name of the album was probably the world's greatest rock and roll band or something like that. And they definitely live up to it. He's worked with a lot of great artists as well. He's worked with Ian Hunter and the UK Subs and the Vibrators and the Dogs the Moor and stuff. So the two of us together are doing about a week's worth of shows in March We're going to be in England and Germany and Sweden. So there's that. There's the new album. Those are the two big things. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, this is how it's going to kind of work. We're going to let you go for the night. A couple weeks. Bob's going to send you the interview. You call me, text me, whatever you want to do as far as where you want to put some music into this thing, and then we'll do it.
Awesome, man. That sounds great.
Hey, Rob, we want to thank you so much, and thank you for being patient with us with all this weather we've been having.
Of course, man. Not a problem. Not a problem.
All right. Well, I'll be in touch with you soon, and you take care of yourself, and let's pray for spring.
Yeah, man. Take care, guys.
Yeah,
Thank
care.
you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You silly little woman. You silly little girl. You got that pretty little head of yours. You're the silly little world. You bought a stairway to heaven. It didn't get you too far. That ain't exactly nirvana, baby. You've been led into the dark. You're a silly little woman. You're a silly little girl. You got that pretty little head of yours. You're the silly little world. I did my damnedest to warn